sauce is the key, we whipping it up. The sauce is the key, we cooking it up. The sauce is the key, we cooking it up. Hey, hey, hey.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of The Sauce. I'm Derrick Mains. This is Andrew Kolikoff. This week, we're going to talk about something that's come up a lot in this last week, and I think there's a specific reason for it. I think anytime the market starts to cool a little bit, there is a shift in attention from the sales and aspect of your business to the operations aspect. We certainly are seeing it here at the Process Fixer, where we're getting way more requests now than we ever have before of people that are now looking internally to try to figure out how to improve margins instead of looking externally. And I think, Andrew, you had such a great topic for this week, and it's really relevant. And that is, what is EOS and how does EOS play into things? Who's EOS good for and maybe not good for? And at what stage should you consider EOS? If you're not familiar, EOS is an entrepreneurial operating system created by Gino Wickman, based upon the book Traction, was the first one. I think Rocket Fuel, the new book for this year is Process. It is an operating system for businesses. About 170,000 companies use EOS and the EOS regimen to grow and scale and better understand their business. I think a lot of times we as consultants get requests from people that say, should I or shouldn't I? And I think there's very specific reasons.
Show, Derrick.
Yeah, there's the show, right?
And let me just interject, though, for 1 second, to give our audience some background as to why you want to listen mostly to Derrick, a little bit to me today, is that, this is what Derrick does for a living, he calls himself the Process Fixer. This was a man who's been a COO of a number of high-profile companies, who understands operations and process at a level and at the granularity level that EOS doesn't even go into, right?
They're way higher level. We're much more
EOS is at a higher level. Totally. You want a COO type mind, they're going to dive into the weeds and develop process even for that granularity. So I want to give our audience an understanding that Derrick really has a deep understanding of whether or not it really is the right fit for you and why. And
I think that's thank you for the introduction. And, EOS really is an operating system. If you think about your computer, right? Many of us might be old enough, have enough gray hair to remember computers before there was really an operating system, right? We had this MS-DOS prompt, and we had to know how to type in certain things to get the computer to do certain things. And what Windows really did was created a very easy to use user interface and user experience that really anybody could understand, and anybody could learn relatively quickly. And for those of us that were young enough at the time, we sort of became, I wouldn't say we're digital natives, but we grew up with it, from the time, not in high school, not for me, right? But as I sort of became a small business owner and became an adult, these types of things were available to us. But what Bill Gates did was created an operating system. Now, what I like about that is it made it easy for people. It also was never perfected. Even to this day, Windows is not perfected. Bill Gates was good at launching an operating system that said, if I give you a framework and I give you a basic understanding and a knowledge and a way to approach things, you're going to be somewhat successful. And then I'll upgrade that as time goes on, and we'll build it better and better into the future. So instead of waiting for the perfect operating system, Bill said, let's just give them some operating system that starts them down this path. And then over time, we can improve upon it based upon
user feedback. That's an excellent analogy.
Yeah. And I really believe that's exactly what EOS does. If you read the EOS books, they are very good at creating this understanding in their customers that you've got to have an operating system. And if you don't, your whole business is is DOS prompts. And everybody's going to have to know how to do programming.
Great analogy.
They're not going to be able to do that.
Let's just keep it real.
Yeah.
For you small business owners that are watching this, you didn't go to school for operations. You went to school. You're in business for something else, not operations. Yeah. Operations is a necessary evil for your business to be efficient and to grow and to scale. That's not what your talent likely was when you started this business. and you didn't go to school for it. So you need something, like he said, to at least give you a framework, a language in which to start. And
I think that's what EOS does so exceptionally well, is they've just instead of saying, hey, look, we have to perfect it and be everything to everybody, they've just said, get started. And it's
not the end all be all. It's not,
of course not.
It's not going to solve perhaps some of the most difficult, complicated problems.
Yeah.
It's just of a language, a new language that you need to learn how to speak.
Yeah. And I think what Gino has done exceptionally well is understanding that there's now a user base of EOS companies, hundreds of thousands of them, that are all speaking the same language. So if I'm in a part of a peer group, even if I don't implement EOS, I bet you use the vernacular that Gino created 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, I think
it's so integrated.
It's seeping into, I think, American business consciousness already.
Absolutely.
You know, people use the term rocks.
Yeah,
and
rocks.
If you don't know what a rock is, like, you're out of the loop, man.
Yeah, or right people, right seats. I mean, that's another one that, like, that is a concept that's very, very common. EOS has 6 different core sort of, quadrants. And I believe that it's very true that what gets measured gets managed. Many companies are in this MS-DOS, where you have to have experts to do things because things aren't very clearly identified. But what EOS talks about is vision, data, process, traction, issues, and people. Those are the 6 areas where they say you have to have I don't want to say an equal focus, because I do believe that one of the things that EOS does not do exceptionally well is the process piece. I think they're very good at identifying the need for it. They're very good at giving you a high level understanding of why you need to get inside your process. I think process experts look at EOS and say, man, you're so close, but you're not there yet.
But I would also add another, Derrick, and that's the behavioral piece.
Yeah, totally. The behavioral piece is really important, because anytime you bring change into an organization, if you aren't implementing a change management strategy, and if you don't have a culture that's set up for change, you're going to have a problem. But I wrote an article about change management and how the evolutionary biology of human beings is that when we are faced with any sort of change, any unknown, we always our limbic system kicks in, the lizard brain kicks in. And the lizard brain only knows how to do 3 things: fight, flight, or freeze.
Very Seth Godin-ish.
Very much, right? But fight, flight, or freeze, that's it. That's the only 3 functions that the lizard brain can use. So when I stand up in front of a company and I say change is coming, we're going to be making major changes here in our organization. No matter how smiley I am and how excited I am, every single person, their limbic system kicks in, and all that's going through their head is just adrenaline and fight, flight, or freeze. What do? Do I freeze? Do I look for a new job? Do I fight this? Do I argue? What do I do? So there's different ways that you have to approach your culture before you bring change and before you start to identify.
Which is obviously near and dear to my heart.
If you don't have the right people in the right seats, then you have to consider if change will even work for you.
Well, here's I think the first thing I tell companies that I work with: are you prepared to let go of a certain amount of your people right away?
Yeah. I used to always
tell people, and I don't care how good they are or how much money they make you, if you're going to move in this direction and this is the direction you are committed to, then you have to equally commit to letting go of good people, at least people you think who are good.
Particularly, Andrew, I'm going to tell you a little story here because I think it really reflects this back. I worked with a company here in Tempe, a manufacturing company. This was probably almost 8-9 years ago now, maybe even 10 years. And we came in and we were going to do a lot of different process change. We were going to process map things. We wanted to try to find inefficiencies, primarily because the company was doing about $10 million a year and was losing money every single year. And the CEO just couldn't figure it out. Like, he just couldn't figure it out. He was an EOS guy. He actually was using EOS, but all of the things that EOS were doing were giving him great visibility into how bad things were. But it wasn't particularly the rocks that they were coming up with and the issues list that they were coming up with. They didn't have the skill set to fix themselves. So that's why they brought me in and they said, hey, we really need some help in this process piece. We think we're just really inefficient. So knowing what the culture was there, I told, I spent maybe a week there, and I told the CEO, I said, we need to have a meeting with everybody and we need to explain to them what I'm doing here, because people are starting to get nervous, right? Anytime you see that consultant that's looking over people's shoulders. And I told him, I said, there's going to be a visceral reaction to what we're going to say, and you have to be prepared for it. And we stood up to about 50 people and we talked through why process was important and how the bonuses of the employees were tied to EBITDA, and we had no EBITDA. We weren't making bonuses, even though the economy was good. It just wasn't looking good for the business. So we know we needed to make a change. And one of the words that I used in my talk was accountability. And before I even got the word fully out of my mouth, one of the women that worked there, she'd been there 25 years, just immediately just went visceral. And she's like, I will not be held accountable. You can't tell me what to do. I know how this place runs. This is bullshit. She just went off, right? And went and grabbed her purse and left. And and now we finished the meeting up, and the CEO says, I need to call her and get her back here. And I'm like, no, you don't. And he's like, but you don't understand. She's the only person that knows how to run her department. And I'm like, is anybody else in there? And I'm like, yeah, there's 5 or 6 other people in there, but she's got way more experience. She's seen it all.
Because so she's not allowing anybody else to grow.
Totally.
To replace her.
And that's exactly what happened. The employees in that department were freaked out. And I said, look, folks, just do what you do every day. Let's find ways to improve it. And we'll revisit this in a week. Week later, I came in, I surveyed the employees in that department, and I said, how are things now versus what they were then? And they were like, you have no idea how much better things are, how much less work there is, right? I'm like, she wasn't contributing at all. She was actually detrimental to the organization.
Well, that's the thing. And that's why I brought that up.
Yeah.
Sometimes what you perceive as your best employees are actually holding you hostage to scaled growth.
Yeah. And Andrew, I got to tell you, people tell me all the time they're irreplaceable. I've never found that to be the case. Even myself.
Me. I mean, everybody's replaceable.
You can replace me. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll get the same performance. It doesn't mean that you'll have the same focus.
Of course.
Hey, maybe you replace me as a COO with somebody who's more sales oriented, and you jump your revenue up and you sell.
Most consultants, even EOS, are great at delivering strategy. And they'll even give you advice on how to create the accountability to implement the strategy. Yeah. But they're not in the behavior business.
No, they're not. And
99.9% of consultants are not behavioral change experts.
Yes.
And that is, to me, where rubber truly hits the road. And that's why I get brought into companies, my firm, because they're like, we're doing this thing and we really think we like it, but we just don't know how to get the organization to behaviorally change to it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of aspects to that. And this is why I'm really big on consultants. Even for my firm, I have my team is all consultants that consult for other people. I hire consultants regularly. Last year, I did 162 projects on Fiverr. Most of those were me hiring consultants that were specialists in a very specific area. I want to understand how to deploy Monday inside of a company and set up a PMO. Boom. That's the guy, right? I'm going to find the guy. He's a couple $100 an hour, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be a sponge and I'm going to consume and learn from that. And that's what consultants are here for, is we are to come in and be almost mercenaries in that sense.
A means to an end.
Yeah, it's a means to an end. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not have a consultant on board for a few years, and there might be lots of different targets that you focus them on. I mean, if you think about medieval Europe, right, mercenaries, they might have worked for one king for a while and then shipped over to another, but for the most part, they stuck with their, they were relatively loyal because that's where they were getting paid and they were providing a service. So we have to think of it in the same way when it comes to consultants. I do really believe that what EOS does exceptionally well is it sets this groundwork and framework for you to be able to effectively manage your business. Now, why did I bring up consultants? Well, because the EOS system can be DIY. It can be do it yourself. You can read the books. You can do it yourself.
Which I have some issues with, but go ahead.
I do too. Here's why I have issues with it. I probably have given this analogy on the show before, but I don't cut my own hair. Why? Well, because the perspective that I have on cutting my own hair would be either, if I had no mirror, I've just got to try to do a little bit of guesswork. If I have a mirror, I have an image that's reflected back to me that is opposite what it actually is. And I also have areas that I can't quite see, right? So now I've got two mirrors and I'm trying to figure out
blind spots.
Right. I mean, I do this all the time.
Everybody
People are
knows.
like, oh, you want an Emmy? And I'm like, yeah, there it is. Oh, no, it's over here. Right. Because it's hard when you're.
By the way, I cut my own hair.
You do cut your own hair, right? So Andrew is the self-implementer of the haircutting system. But I do need somebody that has a perspective that's different than me, that is an expert, that can stand outside, that can get outside of my head, walk around behind me, look at different things, point out different things. All of those are really important and really critical in success. If I just try to operate from my perspective, I'll never truly understand who I am.
So let me add on to that. I did a keynote, and I explained the same thing, but slightly differently. I said that the collective intelligence, knowledge, the collective consciousness of this company has a finite number of ideas and answers and solutions.
Mm-hmm.
No matter it's inarguable.
No, there's no way to do it all. Yeah.
It's limited to your collective consciousness. That's why consultants I was talking about customer experience and how the perception of your customer, the ideas from your customer, sometimes will give you a perspective and an understanding that you'll never have.
Yeah.
And that's the value that a consultant can bring.
For the most part, I don't want to hire a consultant that really, really understands my business and has worked for somebody that's identical to me. Why? Because they'll bring industry bias to things. Somebody who's been in manufacturing for 20 or 30 or 40 years, and you hire them as a consultant, they can't think outside of the box that they have lived inside of for a very, very long time. So that's why I like consultants that have really diverse experience. I can do manufacturing. Right now, we have manufacturing, distribution, healthcare, sporting goods, construction, recreational vehicles, scientific research lab. I mean, these are the types of companies we work with. Why is that so important? Because we bring perspectives to things that are totally different. And this is why I love the EOS implementation system. And there are certified implementers out there that you can hire that are working with 15, 20, 30 other companies that might have some similarities to you, but also have some differences. I've shown this in lots of things before. Let me just show this real quick. This is called a Galton board.
Yeah,
if you've never seen one, right? This tells you your standard deviation. If you can just see it there, right? You can see no matter how many times I turn this, most things are going to fall into this category. And there's a few outliners on each side. What an EOS implementer can do is really help you understand all of the ways that you're similar to other businesses and provide you with those best practices that are going to make you more effective going forward. They're not specialists, but here's the best part. You are the specialist. So you can then focus on the special use cases that are outside of the mean and let them help you get the mean dialed in.
How would we, Derrick, by the way, while I'm talking, take that thing back out and show them exactly what it does.
So it's hard to see, but if you look up a Galton board.
I see it.
Yeah, so when you turn a Galton board, remember Plinko on the prices, right? It's the same thing.
And I love that. I mean, that's a great visual. So let's try to sum this all up and shrink wrap it for our audience. What would you say, just off the cuff, are the top few things a small business owner should look for in whether or not EOS really is the right fit or not? And what questions should they be asking, whether or not they could do it themselves versus hire a consultant to help them?
I think the first thing is just cost, right? I mean, hiring consultants is not something that early stage companies usually do, unless we talked about it a little bit last week. I actually wrote this all out this last week. I talked about the 5 stages of entrepreneurial leadership, and that was
which came out of our previous episode.
Yeah, it was totally off the cuff. I've never written anything on this.
And I was like, dude, that's brilliant.
And I wrote it out, and I'm going to publish it this week. But here's the 5 stages, and this is why I think this is important, because I think it's really relevant. There's the first stage where you know it all. And you do know it all because you're doing the work. Your team can all fit in a minivan and go to lunch. You know every aspect of everything that's happening in your business. The next stage is the I think I know it all. You still are in the mindset of number one. You believe that you know how to run the business. You believe that you're aware of everything that's happening. And then there's going to be a phone call, an email, a Yelp review that you're going to read, and you're going to say, this can't be us. This doesn't make any sense. And you're going to find out it is you. And you're going to realize in that moment that you don't know it all. So here's what most entrepreneurs are going to do. They're going to overreact, and they are going to try to pull the reins in on the business. They're going to take more work on themselves. They're going to lose trust in their people, and they're going to be stuck now in perpetuity of a business that is a mediocre performer that requires you to put a ton of freaking effort into it. Now, there's a pivot point there. If you go in the opposite direction, then stage 3, I know nothing, where you actually say to yourself, you know what, maybe I don't understand this business, and I really need another perspective that can help me align what I don't know with what I do know and help me fill in those gaps. To me, if you're in stage 1, you probably are not a good candidate to have an EOS implementer. You're too small. You have 6 people, and you're packing and shipping when somebody's out sick. I think I know it all. If you are in that moment, your reaction to that moment is going to determine your success or failure as a business. And many times your reaction to that moment is you go to that, I know nothing. And then
usually most small business owners, it's a habitual reaction, which is that they know, and they're just going to fix it in whatever way they can.
Yeah. They think that they've fixed, well, they try to solve the problem. They don't get to the issue behind it. And so that's the key piece, right? Once you get to that point where you maybe are getting to 15 or 20 employees, maybe a little bit more, you're starting to realize, I don't have all the answers. That's a very good time to bring in consultants and a very good time to bring in a system like EOS. Now, I want to go through the next 2 steps real quick. I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to do this because I want to bring this back. The next is, I'm the expert. My people are the experts. At some point, you start to realize.
3 you're at?
That's number 4. So number 3 would be the I know nothing, right?
I said 3.
I know it all.
I said 3 and put 4 fingers up.
I know it all. I think I know it all. I know nothing. I'm an expert. My people are experts. You've reached a point where you now understand highest and best use of your time. You understand what you are an expert as, and you have hired other experts to come alongside you. That's a really great place for EOS, because what tends to happen is when you get into that mode where you know your people are experts, is that you give them maybe too much autonomy and maybe too much control, and you become a little bit more. You believe that their presence is going to solve all your problems, where reality is at that point you need to start putting in a system to make sure that they're held accountable. You got to put the right measurements in place. You really do need at that point a system like EOS. And at that point, you're probably smart enough, and you probably have enough revenue that you can say, I got to hire consultants to help me do this. Then there's the final stage. I'm a leader, and I have very little to do with my day-to-day business. You're a market maker at that point. You're out speaking on topics.
You're a visionary. You're figuring out where to position your business in the future, and you're working on that rather than in the business.
Yeah, and you probably don't have, the numbers of the business, but you probably don't have intricate knowledge of how the business is run. That's okay. And that comes because you have an operating system in place that you trust. Well, where do you get an operating system? Well, you get it from somebody like EOS that can provide that to you. And I do believe that once you hit that stage 5, the I'm a leader stage, most companies start to create their own operating system that probably has a lot of components of EOS, but they do tend to get into that $500 million to $1 billion range where they've got an operations team and research analysts. Why would a
company, let's say you're in stage 4 or 5, and you're considering EOS, what are the factors that would make you steer them toward it or away from it?
Well, I think if you don't have a really good handle on your numbers, you absolutely should look at EOS, because EOS is very good at holding you accountable and bringing in the cadence in your business where you're getting shit done, right? You're constantly getting shit done. The issues that you talk about in your monthly meeting this month are not the same issues as the next month because they've been resolved. So those are the things that EOS can do. Now, I will tell you that sometimes I've seen, particularly manufacturing companies that run like a Lean Six Sigma shop, EOS might not be a right fit for them. They're so dialed in on their numbers. If you think about what Six Sigma is, it means
that's the granularity we talk about.
Right. They're so granular that they might still need a little bit of advice. And I think reading those books would be super helpful for them to understand dashboards.
No, they're on the outside, not just the center.
Yeah, that's right.
All of it.
So that would be the positive things. I think you're going to get clarity into the numbers. You're going to solve issues much more quickly. You're going to hold people accountable. My old business, accountability, measurement, and process. You got the accountability and measurement piece. Dial in when you got EOS. Process is where I feel like it falls a little bit short. And I say that not because there's not a process element to EOS.
No, you just know too much. That's why.
Well, that's right. And I do think that process is different in the sense that, right now we're building out some software to help companies calculate some of these things. And the challenge is that almost all of the tools on the marketplace around process are designed for manufacturing companies. They are designed for you to stand at a production line with a stopwatch and go, 16 seconds, 18 seconds, 23 seconds. How many cycles do I get through the system? What's my tack time? What's my cycle time? What's all these things? That doesn't work as well in an office environment. So there is a little bit of gap. And what I respect about EOS is that EOS, if you read the book Process that they just recently put out, it's very, very good at explaining high level how to document processes so they're easier for people to implement and train on. What they can't get into, because it's way too broad of a topic, they can't get down into the granularity of, I want to know how many fractions of a second it takes you to click that mouse. Because if I can remove one mouse click from our internal application, and I have 16,000 people, and I calculate that out over a day, and I go, oh, I just saved $3 million by eliminating one mouse click. That's not something that EOS can train you on. You have to get it.
You're not going to find that in EOS. You're going to find that. No.
But the good news is,
you'll find it in a Six Sigma high level consulting.
You will, right? So, but what you do have is what gets measured gets managed, and also what you inspect, people respect. So when you do start the process piece of EOS, and you start talking about process, and you start mapping things out, you start asking questions, things will improve even if you don't improve them. And I'm really serious about that. I have seen this happen time and time again, that just going through the process of mapping out the process improves the process. It's like, what the hell happened? But it is very true. When the observer is present, we could get into the whole quantum physics of process, but when the observer is present, the particles react differently. Anybody who's ever read about the double slit experiment,
that's right? That's called, this power, this energy that they're trying to measure of consciousness that they believe now. Scientists, they don't believe it. They know it.
They know that there's something with consciousness.
Might represent that dark energy that we don't know what it is, that it's actual consciousness. Because what they've done, scientists have done, is they've taken, for example, they've done studies. This is one of thousands they've done. They'll put a plant in a room and they will take a light and they'll put that light on a random movement generator where it'll go to the center of the room, to the side, to the corner, and randomly, just based on that random generator, that light will move random with no plant in the room. When they take a plant and they'll put it in the corner of a room, 100% of the time, and they don't know why, that random generator, the same random generator, will shine more towards the corner of that room where that plant is.
Yes.
And when there was no plant in the room. And
they've now done this with mechanical items as well. So there's a recent study, I believe it, I don't remember. It was a major university that found that you could take a mechanical chicken, a wind-up chicken, you could sit it into a box and you could put a pen on it. And each time the chicken moved, it would mark on the floor. And when there's nobody there, you turn it on and it's random. I mean, eventually every part of the box is colored in with the colored pen. When somebody's observing it, oddly enough, the chicken tends to, this is a wind-up chicken, right? The chicken makes more marks closer to the observer unless Mark's farther away from the observer.
And
it's
that's
like,
exactly,
there's no freaking reason for that to happen.
Well, no, I mean, what science
there is. We just don't know
realize it's that there's this actual energetic force, which is this consciousness piece. And I think that's what Derrick is laying over in his argument with even EOS, by just having the consciousness of mapping things out, actually automatically creates change.
I've seen it happen so many times inside businesses that if you start to observe the process improves. In closing, what EOS does, it creates a really great framework for you. But that does not mean, to your point, Andrew, that that's the be all end all. You have to recognize it's a starting point on a journey. And at some point, you're going to need some cultural help. At some point, you're going to need some ops help. At some point, you still might need some sales help. That's okay. EOS creates the framework for you that you can create the rock and say, my rock for this quarter is to bring somebody like Andrew in to do some of the leadership coaching.
And that's how I would end. If you are considering it, good for you. You need to have an operating system. But if you also decide that you need outside help, either for granularity, or for the behavioral aspect, or to help you get better right people on the right, on the bus. Derrick and I don't do that part as much as we'll do the behavioral aspect, and him handle more of perspective, granularity, and a greater depth. You can always message us through our YouTube channel.
And we know lots of EOS implementers as well. I think one of the great things even about the EOS implementers here in town is that many of them are specialists. Many of them are focused on, like the two that I work with regularly and have been doing more with, they only work on bigger companies, right? They don't, but you, like Jeremy's another guy here in town, right? Jeremy does a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, right?
Yes, he does.
And he specializes in that. And he has a perspective that's really valuable.
And he's very successful at it.
He's very successul at it. And as Susan, Tom, there's a lot of them here in town. They all have specialties.
And then I introduced you to Mark, so you're just going to learn about him too.
I met him here recently, actually. He and I had a conversation at one of the Secret Sauce events. Mark's a great guy. Yeah. Really intriguing. So I mean, it's really about finding the right person for you. And I think even if you're looking at doing it yourself, it's worth interviewing.
That's really important. And let's end there, because there are many implementers out there. So then maybe your question is, well, who do I hire? And my perspective is, you could try to hire one who has a great degree of understanding of your industry. Mm-hmm. You could also hire them on how they're a personal fit with your culture and how you really jive with that person. And you may be weighing, well, which one is more important? That's something you have to decide as a business owner. Me personally, I always err on the side of finding my culture, my fit, my right person first. Skills second, because I can get skills, I can learn skills, I can bring in somebody else for skills, but culture is, to me, is the bottom line.
I love it. All right. Thank you all for tuning into this edition of The Sauce. I don't know if this will be 1 or 2 episodes, because we got about 45, 50 minutes in here.
I don't know. But
I'll let the producer figure that out.
Enjoy our conversation.
I know it's good, because it really drives a lot of great thoughts. And I even wrote down some exercises and things here I'm going to work on afterwards.
As did I.
Just to sort of take it to the next level and try to understand a little bit better about how we can implement these things into the businesses that we work with. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Derrick.
And thank you all for tuning into The Sauce. Until next time.
The sauce is the key, we whipping it up. The sauce is the key, we cooking it up. The sauce is the key, we cooking it up.